Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. This is very big day for us because we are celebrating our 500 episode. We are just finishing our 500 episodes, and I want to give thanks to all of our speakers, Professor Edward, Professor Jackson, Professor David Smith, Mr. Marshall, Madam Ali Rice for joining today's sessions. It's really hard, but because of you, all of your support, we continue it like 5 days, 6 days every week. We are continuing our sessions, and we are very happy. We are getting very good support, and I get a special gift for today, especially one of the district from India. I think Professor Jack also know about that Himachal district from India. They have panchayat, like small village, 30,000 people. They collaborate with World Talent Economy Forum because they want to develop university in Himachal. And all of our speakers definitely will be part of our projects as a faculty, and you can offer your solutions and solve the problem. First, I want to give chance to Professor Jackson, and definitely you are a great inspiration for all of our youth. So what you want to
Yeah.
share with us about industry and innovation?
So I think that innovation is a non-stop process, and every time you innovate something, it lasts for a while, and then something else replaces it. So I was going to Singularity University in San Francisco, studying at the NASA campus 6 years ago. And I was quite shocked when I learned about 200 different kind of technology coming up, and almost all of them are going to reduce the need for labor. That means human beings are not much needed as the technology progresses. You will need some people to design it, to monitor it, to improve it, but you don't need a lot of people. So things like algorithm will replace manual labor, robots will replace warehousing workers, chatbot will replace call center people, and as we just keep going, we'll find more and more services provided by technology. So in the beginning, I was very shocked. How can we be so stupid to design technology to make ourselves useless? And after about 2 weeks into the course, I asked a different question. If the robots are going to do everything, then how can our educational system be teaching the people how to be robots? And that's exactly what all the primary school, secondary school, university, they are teaching us how to repeat what you are taught. And then if you are able to remember what the teacher teach you, then you regurgitate, you get a certificate, you get a degree, you get a diploma. But they are useless because the robot can do better than you. The robot has 100% memory retention, and it also know how to interpolate information across sector, across discipline, and come up with better result. And we forgot what we said last week, and the robot remember. And so after a while, the doubling of the memory of the processing power of the computer chip every 18 months or 20 months, then one day, won't be very long, one day, we will reach a point where the computer can process the same amount of brain power as a human being. But on top of that, 18 months after that point, they will be able to think double the amount of capacity as a human brain. And then what happened, right? So uh, I realize somebody is eating or moving his table. So can you mute yourself? So I think we cannot be better robots. So we have to be better human beings. Therefore, the things that don't change, we have to learn. For example, curiosity, courage, compassion, commitment, collaboration, humility, creativity, all these human soft skills. Then with this kind of imagination and all that, we are able to be uh, controlling the robots because we are not thinking like the robots. We're thinking like the master of the robot. And I think this is the way we have to change education from kindergarten at 4 years old to primary school, to secondary school, to university. And we have to think like a very wise human being. And this is very, very lacking because the entire educational system is teaching us to be a robot. So we need to change the system such that we are able to be master of the robots. But so far, if we look at all the university around the world, even Harvard University, Oxford, they are still teaching people to regurgitate. So I think whoever screw that system will be the winner. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent, Professor Jackson. Especially, we are also big fan of your work. We have our world famous scientist for artificial intelligence from AGI Lab, uh, Professor David J. Kelly. Maybe he can bring many interesting idea about robotics and AI. And beside that, one of the initiative I want to share your initiative because regularly, when personally I visit your work, like your Facebook and your very interesting work. So especially if you share some of the news about this program, I really like maybe there are 3 days training program or something. So can you share something about this program, Professor Jackson?
Uh, yeah,
Oh,
last
you
three
cannot see
days
it.
we have been
I think 3 days
training
courses
the,
for.
yeah. So we got this secondary school girls from Raffles Girls School, and all of the students, they come in batches because of COVID. We cannot take everyone. They come to our building in batches, and we train them to understand the sustainable development goal, understand social entrepreneurship. And I think that at such an age, which is in their teens, we can first plant the seed in their brain how they are going to think about humanity in the future. Because these people, all these young ladies, some of them will go out to be our political leaders, some of them will become corporate leaders, social leaders, and if they grow up trying to learn like a robot, trying to be greedy, trying to be scarcity mindset, then we would have failed in our educational system. In fact, the entire educational system of every school in the world, I would say almost every school in the world, is the wrong curriculum. We have been teaching this in the 19th century, and now it's the 21st century, and we are teaching the same way we are teaching 200 years ago.
Thank you, Professor Jack. Professor Edward, what you want to add? Professor Edward, are you with me? Professor Edward. Then I want to give chance Professor David Smith.
We can't hear you, David. Can you hear him?
Can't hear you. You're on mute.
Do this. I appreciate today, Sharif. One of the organizations I'm a senior fellow in is the Institute of Innovation, Creativity, and Capital, which to me goes really hand in hand with what you're talking about today. Now, I like to go back and look, the first industrial revolution started in the mid 1800s, and it was really water and steam power to mechanize production. The second used electric power. Then the third one is a digital revolution, which we know where we are. And we're now moving into the fourth industrial revolution. And it really is looking at how to use the whole concept of innovation, of creativity, of making the ways to make a difference. The real interesting thing, though, is the fourth industrial revolution is really fundamentally different from the three. It's characterized by a fusion of technology, a blurring of the lines between physical, digital, biological worlds. We're seeing ubiquitous digitalization, ubiquitous computing, mobile supercomputing, artificial intelligence, robots, self-driving cars. One of the interesting things I'm tracking closely to me here in Austin is some of the neural technology brain enhancements, genetic editing. All of these are part of where we are in this new fourth generation world we're living in. And it's been done in such an interesting way when you look at research. I agree with a lot of what Jack Sim said there. But I also know, if I'm beginning to look at it, that if I look globally at the money spent in research and development, it's less than 1% in research and innovation and things. And it is historically in the developed nations, but one of the real interesting new trends is that we're seeing increased money being dedicated in the developing world, particularly in innovation, particularly in research, and how those are going. One of the things that we see is for every job in research, it creates about 4.5 jobs in other industries. It's just like the same thing. Every job in manufacturing creates about 2.2 jobs in other industries as well. But innovation helps boost usually the GDP of the local organization. It helps you promote entrepreneurship. It attracts better researchers, better students into the universities. So it really has this ripple down effect of going across your whole society. If you look at many of the developed nations, they have built their future industry, innovation, creativity. And we're now beginning to see this become a global phenomenon under Industry 4.0 or the fourth industry revolution. And I think it's going to continue. But this time, it's going to be more of a global view. Many of them, even the third generation, which was really the technology age, the innovation, the information age, took a while to go global. I think this one's going to be global from the start. So, Sharif, that's my first comments.
Thank you. Professor David Jekali, especially you are from AGI Lab. We are discussing about innovation, industrial innovations. So if you add some point, how your innovation can be helpful for this global community.
Well, specifically to the stuff we're working on in our lab, it's about driving innovation in large groups. It's not about individual innovation, but being able to optimize what people in groups can do, whether it's in organizational structures or organizations or e-governance, things like that, where anyone can post their ideas and their thinking, and then it's processed by the system, and then it's kind of worked on collectively, without a bias that you see in groups that are in groups typically. In terms of innovation, or from our standpoint, it really is about just driving the innovation within groups, and not necessarily writing a software program that's going to be doing some kind of innovation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Marshall, what do you want to add for industrial innovation for today?
So this is a very excellent topic, Sharif, and thank you for having me on this panel. Those who have seen me on previous panels know that there's two elements that I'm working with, together with a lot of the panelists on this program, to bring innovation into the marketplace with regard to the climate crisis. And I do recognize the challenge that Jack Simmons pointed out. That's a big challenge about jobs and the education component. I totally agree with him on that. I've been part of my business for the past 30 years has been involved in the adoption of innovations, and a lot of people would be surprised out there that maybe for every 100 innovations that are created, maybe a very few are adopted at large. Now, when you're talking about Silicon Valley type innovations, of course, that is exponential and it's different. But even there, for every 100 innovations that are created in Silicon Valley, having to do with AI and other technologies, many do not get adopted. And so there's a difference between bringing in innovation, creating innovations, and then having them adopted by the public at large. And part of the issue, I think, is what Jack Sim related to, is that people have been educated in 19th century educational approach, and they're not in the 21st century. And I understand his concern about, lack of jobs, or robots taking away jobs, or innovation taking away jobs. But at least since since World War II until today, it does happen, but then other jobs come in their place. And then the question is, are you retraining the people for those jobs? Are they going to have the educational skill sets? And what I think Jack Sim brings to the table is the question about humanity, compassion, sensibilities, sensitivity. And that's a problem. We have that problem. We've always had that problem without innovation. I mean, look at World War II. You had Nazis, talking about Nazis, right? In warfare, world wars, 2 world wars in the 20th century. So hopefully we won't get to another world war in the 21st century. So we're always challenged by these threats and challenges from folks who are not in alignment with compassion and with their humanity, and instead are more concerned about greed, power at all costs. So I think innovation can actually address some of those issues. And I know I've been seeing it in clinical psychology approach. I still believe that human psychologists are better than robot psychologists, and I don't think AI can replace that, certainly not yet. If you know anything about clinical psychology, you'll see that it takes a human to interact with a human to get that information and help transform their personalities from personality disorders to wholesome personalities. With regard to the climate, and that's where my focus is on today, is that we're bringing innovations and technology that have been around 80 years, but we're repurposing it and using it to take waste and convert it into materials that lower the environmental impacts of the climate crisis. So we are improving soil health, we're improving water quality, and we're improving air quality, all having to do with humans, not robots. Robots don't eat, they don't need soil, they don't need They don't need air. They just run around on power. But without the power, they're not going to run at all. So it's really still up to human beings, in my estimation, for the foreseeable future. And that we just, I think what Jack Sim is saying is we need to retrain and educate people from the fourth year, I think you said, or the fourth grade or something like that, from early on until people graduate from universities and colleges. And also, there's plenty of nursing care out there. I know that in Japan they're using robots to care for elderly people, but they still need human nurses and human doctors to actually make things happen. And I could see that at some point in the time in the future that those human nurses might be replaced by robots. But I still think that Jack is correct that we need to look at this from the point of view of humanity and not technology. Innovations are great if they contribute to humanity, but some innovations are not great. Obviously, nuclear weapons are an innovation that we didn't have prior to 1945. And look where we're at now with what's going on in Ukraine and the threat of tactical nuclear weapons being deployed by the Russians in Ukraine, and maybe even that would affect the rest of Europe and even the developing world. It could go as far south with the winds that carry those nuclear particles into developing world. And as everyone knows, I'm out there that's been watching my participation in these programs. We're for helping the developing world create a level playing field with the developed world and create more of a middle class approach, an economic approach that creates jobs, not takes away jobs, and at the same time creates jobs that are innovative and interesting to do for people. I've always noticed that in my companies that I've had, we always try to make the task, we delegate the task to people to do things. Even if a computer can do it, we want people to do it. And because it makes them think. If they think, as the expression is, out of the box, and they can bring in their own innovations to the table, but they're not replacing themselves. They're actually adding to the welfare of humanity, especially when it comes to the climate crisis. And we all need to eat, so we need better quality food. We need more nutrients. One of the things that is causing some health issues in humans is that there's poor nutrients in the soil. It used to be that soil loam used to be maybe, I'm trying to think in centimeters, but it's 5 inches deep or 6 inches deep. Today, if you go to the central plains of many wheat growing communities, that would be Ukraine or even the central, the Midwest of the United States or the Central Valley of California, the soil loam is down to 2 inches or less. That's not healthy soil biome. It doesn't help create nutrients, and you need nutrients in your food, especially your vegetables and your fruits. And if you don't have that, you're not getting all the nutrients you need. So you'd have to supplement them with other things. And that could be a business into itself. I know there is a business in Wisconsin, in the United States, that's called Standard Process that creates whole food supplements. But is that what we really need? What we really need is fresh fruits and vegetables that people can consume that actually help our brains grow, help children grow, and supply the health that we need on an ongoing basis. So that's my take for the first round.
Thank you, Mr. Marshalls. Madam Ali Rice,
Okay.
what do you want to add for today's discussion? I know
Happy 500th forum. It's very impressive what you've achieved, Sharif, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, I love what Jackson said, and it speaks to me in volumes. So I'm a creative. I've worked primarily in education for the last 50 years, and I've done so through facilitating a creative process. And I think that creativity is key for our young people, so that they're basically kind of versatile and adept and kind of ready for what the future holds for them. I'm part of the Royal Society of Arts as well, and the most prominent person in the Royal Society of Arts was Sir Ken Robinson, and that was all about the creative process and creativity and how we need to nurture it and let children blossom so that they retain it and they're naturally curious And I think that's key to whether that child's 4 or 14 or you know, I think for me, kind of retaining that inner child so you naturally have awe and wonder of the world is key for adults as well. And that's key to innovation. So I think, and what's really interesting is NASA did kind of a research years and years ago about children and their genius, and a lot of the education system knocks that genius of children out of it because of the way the system works. So I think there's definitely room for the systems in place to be places of innovation as well. And so what's interesting actually is in 2020, what happened because we got locked down is the innovation in education had to happen because we all had to work from home and children had to be educated. And I attended a Royal Society of Arts event, and they said that they pushed that innovation in online education because of the circumstances by 10 years. So we're 10 years supposedly ahead of ourselves because of what happened in the pandemic, which is kind of exciting. But the drawback to that as well is there's big gaps between those families that have got technology and support at home and those that haven't. So in some ways, the social gaps widened, but the kind of the impetus and ability to online educate and also having inspiring and engaging lessons is there. And so it's incredible, especially what teachers achieve because they were having to do something that was unfamiliar to them. So it's kind of expanded their practice as well. And I think the last thing I was going to say is that my children are lucky in that they attend an outstanding school that's a state school. And since 2020, they've been building a state-of-the-art art centre that's going to support. So they not only support creativity, but support kind of academia as well. And I think it's that creativity and all the things that the arts and creativity bring kind of really uplift the human spirit. And that thing is, so I know from my own experience that there are mainstream schools in the UK that are pushing the envelope and continually innovating, and they encourage children to think for themselves, and it's not just a regurgitation process. But I appreciate what Jackson said is that the kind of the old-fashioned way of going through GCSEs and A-levels was always to kind of regurgitate, kind of retain the facts and then be able to use them. And there's much, so as far as I'm concerned, you don't really show what you know until you can apply your knowledge and utilize it in some way. And those creative processes, and even better to answer creative briefs so they actually produce something at the end so they have real hands-on experience, is amazing. So I think that kind of industry-led kind of innovation so that they actually make prototypes that work, or they're the kind of projects that we've done before. That there's nothing better for children than to kind of use maths and design something that they can actually fulfill a brief for and then actually make in real life, or so it's kind of applying knowledge and kind of giving them skills and the ability to think for themselves so that they all have a shared experience, but an individual one is really important. So yeah, I was fantastic. So yeah, education and innovation is my thing for sure. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Professor Donald, what do you want to add today?
Well, I want to focus on innovation first and then move into education. I want to kind of draw a little frame and point out there's two types of innovation. There's, generally people think of it. One of them is incremental innovation, and the other one is disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation, incremental innovation is when you've got existing processes and existing ways of doing things, and then you make them better. And so Japan is very good at incremental innovation, but they're less good at disruptive innovation. Silicon Valley is very good at disruptive innovation because, as I've said before, Silicon Valley's product is actually companies. And companies don't necessarily last forever. But if you have existing processes, people they have a habit of doing things in a certain kind of way. And so within a company, companies exist to make sure to prevent innovation. They want to be able to have every person be a little cog inside of a machine, and then be able to list what skills that cog has. And if that cog leaves, they can go out and find another cog that does the same thing to put in its place. So that's the dream of management. It goes back to Taylor. And so innovation is very difficult within a corporation. So for example, Cisco has had a long history of having people quit Cisco and start their own company when they see something that Cisco could do extremely much better. And then the company grows and it gets to be big enough that it's actually making whatever that it is, and then Cisco buys them. And Cisco's their customer in the first place, which helps them grow and become viable companies. So disruptive innovation has a lot of failures. So when I go to Finland, I talk to them and I point out that there's about as many people in Silicon Valley as there are in Finland. And for every company that they've heard of, Facebook and Hewlett-Packard, there's 1,000 that have failed. And it's difficult to do in a small country. So whatever small country you are, building in this ability to fail is incredibly important. So somebody mentioned ideas versus innovation. I would argue that ideas really don't have much to do with innovation, because people sit around a water cooler, sit around a coffee shop and have wonderful ideas until they turn blue in the face. But something isn't innovation until society agrees that it's innovation. It's not. I can't just decide that I'm creative or innovative or anything else like that. It's not my decision. The decision is made by the people around me, and therefore innovation has to affect the world around you, or it's just not innovation. And so one of the things that happens, there's a sociologist named David Obstfeld who went into a General Motors plant and studied where the innovations happen, and there were incremental innovations, which is what can happen inside of corporations. And he found that the places where innovation happened were places where people managed to get different groups within the company together. So basically, innovation isn't something that suddenly gets poured in your head by some external supernatural force. Innovation is basically looking and seeing something that somebody else has done and seeing how that could be applied within your particular area. And so what that requires for somebody to be innovative is to basically have the cognitive flexibility to be able to become part of these two different groups and be able to understand how something in one place could be applied with another. And Obstfeld found that inside of this organization, he could identify generally people who were able to do that, and they also could drive something actually coming from it. I mean, it's all well and good to have ideas, as I said, but without actually doing something, you don't have innovation. And I've just been reading a wonderful book called The Myth of AI. And it really lays out why AI is basically just hype. And they just named it. It was Turing who basically got this idea, and he basically redefined intelligence to be something that's just problem solving. But intelligence is situated in your world. It's your intelligence has to do with your relationship to other people. It has to do with how you affect the world around you. It has to do with your environment, with your body, all these kinds of things. It's not just problem solving, because computers don't have problems. They're just machines. And so what we have as human beings that allow us to be innovative and luck. It was luck, basically, serendipity. In fact, Charles Sanders Peirce, in this book, he relies heavily on the philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce, who developed pragmatism, was basically pointed out that it's our actions. But what I want to get to is the thing of luck, because how many of you have, I know sometime in your life, everyone has met somebody that when they talk to them, after they talk to them, they completely change their thinking about something. I mean, and how do you meet that person? Most people get their jobs through luck. And to create that serendipity, that luck, is to be able to have the cognitive flexibility to be in these different groups, and also the ability to be able to do something with it. And so the question gets to be how, in fact, I wouldn't call it luck. I mean, we always make hypotheses about things, and then we test the hypothesis. We do that instinctively. We're doing it constantly. Peirce called that abduction. And so where do we get the knowledge? We get it from other people. We don't just make up reading or whatever else that happens that we are involved in our world. So I want to, how can you get from here to there? And that's where we talk about education, is education. I kind of differentiate the idea of education versus training. So we can train people to be almost like computers, where we teach them a certain specific set of skills, and those skills are valuable, so we can plug them into that slot inside of a corporation, and they can do their work until that particular slot becomes meaningless, and then they're gone. I mean, they don't have anything else to do. They're used up. The part wore out. We just throw the part away. And Finland has a different approach to it. The way they actually teach innovation in their universities, they've developed a system where there's no separate subjects, like they don't have English and math and so on like that. They integrate everything so that you can see how math is part of other things. Like I keep hearing people saying, I never use algebra again. And I say, yes, you do. You just don't know you're doing it because you were taught math in this compartmentalized way that doesn't allow you to see. And so that kind of education helps create cognitive flexibility. One of the things that has been studied that helps create cognitive flexibility is reading fiction. So here, training, we wouldn't spend any of our time reading Goethe or Hemingway or whoever and trying to understand the emotions, the social intelligence that it requires to be able to actually be innovative. Because as I said, unless other people consider you innovative, you're not innovative. And so that goes back. I brought up Peirce, who invented pragmatism, but there was another philosopher named John Dewey, who was a pragmatist too, who basically has the idea that education has to be action. And so I'm going to leave it there and point out that education, we don't know something unless we can do something, because it's in our bodies that we know things. We don't know things like it's some, I don't know, what do people think? Like knowledge is some disembodied whatever. It's not. So.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Professor Jack, as everybody discussing about educations, because innovations and education's improvements, I think it's work together. We are from developing nations. Developed nations has different concept Singapore definitely a very good model for developing world, especially in Asia. So, what is your advice? Even World Talent Economy Forum working with grassroots level people in developing worlds, we are offering educational solutions. So, if we want to produce effective human resources from academy, what will be the best model? And we want to ensure that industry also get benefit from theirs, government also get benefit from theirs, and what will be the best model according to your
I
planning?
can speak from a small country like Singapore, and I think that eventually they will discover that the whole country, all the people, all the government policy, all the companies must become a seamless ecosystem. That means right now people think this is my company and that's your company, this is my house or my um favorite thing. But eventually, we have to be like a forest. We have to feed into one another's synergy and unlock all the synapses power that we can have if we were not just working alone. Because if we were to compete with big countries, they have all the resources. They have oil, they have land, they have rubber trees, oil palm, fruits, food, anything. But our country is only 720 square kilometers. It's like nothing compared to big countries. So if we want to compete against everybody else, we have to become an ecosystem, which means that whatever we do adds to the entire uh, forest ecosystem. If you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, they don't like each other. That's not an ecosystem, right? And then you look at the Republican, you have the Trump, and then you have the Republican. So there's again a split over there. So if we were to think of a country like America, then you see what is the lack? The lack is trust. So if you want to build an ecosystem, then you need trust and ethos where you think that you put in something and you get out more because you trust each other. So you then go to the Nordic state like Norway or Finland or Sweden or Denmark, this kind of country. They believe that I pay very high taxes, but I'm going to get so much more back, so it's all worth it. Whereas in most countries, they say, no, I got to pay less taxes and I want more service. So that more service comes from where? Nobody could understand. Probably come from printing extra dollars and borrowing in the future. But so I think that if we were to think about how to be better and better and better, eventually we need harmony, we need trust, and dare I say, we need love. Because if we have love, trust, faith, harmony, we can, without fear, fit into one another ecosystem and become very, very effective, very efficient, very safe, and very joyful because we are loved by each other. I don't know when we're going to become like that, but wisdom, trial and error will bring us there. Just hope that we arrive there faster but we definitely will come to this conclusion if we are smart enough. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Jackson. Professor David Jekali, what you want to add?
Well, I think this forum is a little bit out of my expertise. I think one comment though about education and this whole pandemic, I can see why what drove a lot of innovation in terms of online learning. But so let me preface my statement by the fact that my wife is an educator, and what I'm hearing from her though is that this pandemic has really damaged the social skills of children, and while there has been a lot of innovation with online learning, at the same time the damage it's caused to the children with a lack of socialization, I think is not a not a good thing. And that's, like I said, otherwise I this is pretty far out of my box as a research scientist focused on artificial intelligence.
Definitely, we can listen from you about improvement of AI, because there are some debating issues already comes. Even in World Talent Economy Forum, we arrange some debate on artificial intelligence. You are from lab, you are innovators, you can give us the real informations, and yeah, debating is good because we can learn from both of the views. So you can add some of your views from AI and innovation. How does it work? How it can be helpful for human progression?
Well, I can make one comment then. Where I found the most innovation, or the most ability to innovate, is when you set aside your biases and just approach a problem from the standpoint of a child. A lot of the stuff that we've come up with is so far out of left field that it's not that any of it was hard. It's just it's so outside the box that people just never thought about it before. And so I think for us, where we've driven the most innovation is to make sure we get people to set aside their biases, their preconceived notions, and approach problems the same way a child would. And that's where we've actually driven the most innovation in our specific field.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. What you want to add, especially education and for innovations?
Well, I love what David just said, because I believe one of the key elements in collaboration is what drives the innovation that you have. Group intelligence is the term I prefer to use, because as you pull the people with their competencies and capabilities together, your knowledge increases to the log instead of linear. And I think that's so important for what we want to do around innovation, particularly if we're doing large scale innovation like what it takes to innovate in industry. I also agree with what Jack and Donald and others said about some of the approaches to get there. I have a slight difference with Donald on the types of innovation. I believe there's three. I believe there's incremental, I believe there's breakthrough, but I also believe there's a type of innovation called distinctive innovation, which is actually what you see in the middle of the S curve. And distinctive innovation is not something that's fundamentally new like a breakthrough innovation. It's not just a little bit more, a little bit extra like incremental, but it's taking the technologies you have and using them in a fundamentally different way. For example, video conferencing is not a breakthrough. It's not an incremental enhancement. It's taking multiple technologies and doing them in a different way as a substitute for in-person meeting and other things like that. So you do have those different types of innovation, which I think are very important. I also, though, really get in with what Jack said and what David was saying there. in that you have to put a framework in place to understand particularly industry innovation. Um, the framework I use is one that we created called Six Views of the Future, where you have to look at it as a really a different way with different techniques on it. The views are an extrapolator, pattern analyst, uh, goal analyst, counterpuncher, intuitor, and an artist. And what that does is you begin to look at them with the different techniques underneath it. It forces your mind to think in different ways. It also allows you the possibility to go back and eliminate error. And you can do that by using these different views. One other point here is that I believe David's wife hit one of our challenges on the head so strongly right now, in that what COVID has done, not just with our children, but it has done with our older citizens, it's done with the others, is it has really gone back and changed our social, emotional learning and skills. And that's why our company, our holding company, started a company called Universal Tutor, which is using a 3D conversational avatar and a lot of AI and other tools underneath it to really teach social and emotional learning in multiple environments to multiple age groups. And COVID has really messed with our social side, which is messing with how we are going to innovate with each other, which is messing how we're going to collaborate with each other. And it's one of the big changes, Sharif, where programs like yours during today, and that you've done for the last 500, is one of the tools that can help us begin to bridge some of these gaps because of the diversity of the opinions you have, the diversity of the intellect you bring onto the programs. And I think it's really there. But the on the innovation side, we just really have to put the pieces together. One of the questions you often ask me, Sharif, is what can you do about this? And I think to do the things we're talking about here is you have to invest in discovery. You have to understand that innovation is a tool not just for addressing competition, but innovation is a tool for improving the world, improving what's around you with you. And it has to go really much more beyond just the three P's, you know, the product, the process, and the people. Those are important, but they have to be there. The other couple of things on it, and this is where it's hard to put it into place, is you have to really align innovations with market needs, with market pain. It's really difficult is I can innovate all day long on things and no one wants it. And kind of like Donald said earlier when he was comparing Silicon Valley to others, is that Silicon Valley does a good job of innovating, but creating them around customer needs, customer pain, market, where many other innovations around the world are neat science, but not without a lot of application. So you really have to do that. But to do all those, you have to create an innovative culture. And that innovative culture has to be from top to bottom, but even as important from bottom up. And then collaboration is really the cultivator of innovation. And if you cannot change your culture, if you cannot put the structures in place, I mean, the school that Jack is teaching with the young girls is a great place to begin to say it's not just the knowledge transfer, it's the culture transfer. And as I listened to Jack Sam on some of it, a lot of his thoughts go down to the culture side. I can tell you, being an executive in two very large R&D consortia, the MCC and Symatech consortia, our biggest challenge on the early days of the consortia, which these were innovation consortia for whole industries, was to get the culture right. You know, we were bringing people in from hundreds of other companies in Symatech and all the top companies in the semiconductor industry and the computer industry, very different cultures at each one. but we had to create a unique, innovative culture. And these are the things that let you outpace the innovation, is to pull that collaborative culture in place. And Sharif, you always pick great topics. And I think this is one that can have not just an incremental impact in the developing world, but this is one where you can begin to go through a distinctive impact and a breakthrough impact by using the principles which all your folks have heard today, of the collaboration, of the thought processes, of the education, of the impact to society and on the global scale that each of the speakers have talked about, and truly can make a difference in the developing world. So, Sharif, thank you.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. Marshall.
Well, thank you, Sharif. A lot of the speakers here have brought a lot of aspects on the topic of innovation. And I know that the second part of the topic is infrastructure. And that is something I would like to address. But I'd also like to point out that I was raised by an innovator and an inventor. My father received his first patent at the age of 14 in 1929, right before the crash of the world economy. And during World War II, he was in charge of the Special Devices Group of the U.S. Navy, kind of like the Q for James Bond in those movies. In the end, he had over 100 patents to his name. And one of the things he invented the thermal barrier window. He also invented the Mustang, the braking system for the Shelby Mustang. And I always used to ask him, how are you able to bring these innovations to the table? Why are you able to do it and other people don't do it? And his response was two things. He said, you have to approach the world that you don't know what you don't know. And I would say, what does that mean? That doesn't make sense to me. And he goes, it's very simple. If you have the attitude that you don't know what you don't know, that means your mind is open to what you don't know. But by conversely, you can assume that many other people out there are all going to be people who know what they know, and that's what Jack was talking about. They're caught up in their boxes. There was a song back in the '60s called the Tiki Taki boxes, where you're stuck in a box. And so I would say that. And then my second question to him was, well, okay, that's good to know, but he says, well, there's one more thing I want to add to you for this. He said, most people have what's called linear thinking, meaning A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, a mathematical construct. A lot of people's minds work that way, but not always. A lot of emotional content gets disjointed. And I think Jack brought that in, and so did everybody else on this panel, including Donald and everybody else. The other thing he said is, though, lateral thinking is the key. You can teach lateral thinking, and I think that's what my father meant by what Jack is talking about. Lateral thinking is, okay, if A equals B and B equals C, that's great, that's linear. What's lateral? Well, how do you connect P, Q, and Z? And people do that. And he says, trained engineers that are trained to do engineering, to put a system together, today they do it on CAM systems, instead of a drawing board, they just follow the rules. But an out-of-the-box thinker who does lateral thinking connects the dots in a different way. And in order to do that, that has to do with training, emotional content, and I think, as David Smith pointed out, also a sensibility of knowing that you are bringing different components together. And it's that third element that he added to Donald's two elements. And I've seen it. We're doing it ourselves. We have a technology that is known as pyrolysis, which is burning in the absence of oxygen. We can convert waste into materials that can reduce the environmental impacts in many ways. And it's very complex. But pyrolysis has been around 80 years. It's not something that was invented today. We didn't invent it. What we've done is we've improved that inflection point on the technology, and we're using it in a way that it hasn't been used before. Pyrolysis was used predominantly for chemical processing in large quantities, like creating glycanol and other chemicals for that to make other materials. What we're doing is we're taking pyrolysis and we're taking 120 metric tons a day of waste of all kinds, and converting that into a material known as biochar, thermal energy, and syngas. And syngas in itself is problematic because it has volatile organic compounds and polyaromatic hydrocarbons in it that are GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. But we have another technology that can take that syngas and convert it into electricity with ultra low to zero emissions. And that's what the world needs right now for the climate crisis. So I think everybody on this panel is addressed some really salient pictures. So if we go to infrastructure, what's the main infrastructure that we need right now for humanity to prosper and overcome the climate crisis and reduce the get to 1.5 degrees centigrade that everybody at COP26 spoke about, and everybody's disappointed in the outcomes because of the politics that's going on there. I think if you act like Jack said, and like David and Donald and Ali have all talked about, education is a key component to this. But right now, we need to act more rapidly. Time is of the essence. To do that, we need that type of innovation that David mentioned, the middle innovation that one can bring to the table. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. The permits are already there for production. We know how to mass produce this stuff. We also know how we can create good quality jobs for people, especially in the developing world, that aren't robotic and that are not necessarily driven by AI. In fact, it's better to have a human at the helm, especially when it comes to the climate crisis. So that's my takeaway, and I just want to thank everybody on this panel for supporting Sharif in his endeavor for his 500th session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Madam Ali.
Okay, so I think I'm going to go. I think for the infrastructure, one of the things that's happened since 2020 is that the systems in place in the UK, and which is where I'm from, aren't sustainable. So the health system, the financial system, the education system, and the thing is that this sustainability needs to be there, so that we need to change the way we've done things and look at innovation and the way that we move forward. So there are sustainable things. And I think one of the things that's happened is that because we can be connected, I think we need to look at best practice and how that can be rolled out in whatever field we're looking at, whether it be education or health. And the thing is that I think technology provides solutions for health complaints that that can be treated online. So I think that kind of opportunity to be treated online and have best, because at the moment in the UK, a lot of people have online consultations with their doctors. So nowadays, there's an online consultation, no one drives anywhere, the time's restricted, and even in school, we have parents' evenings when we have an automated system to see teachers. So we don't go anywhere, they stay in school or stay at home, but so it's I think limiting how far we need to go and what we need to do, so there's more efficiency. But the thing is, there still needs to be that human contact. So I think that human contact is incredible, and I think there's no substitute to having a real life teacher in front of you. But the thing is, in 2020, I had a mentor and did intuitive training that was transformative. And I think the thing is that online training and education can be incredible, and that brought mostly women entrepreneurs from all over the world into a space that was incredibly innovating and insightful, and just so I think the way that we evolve is really important. One of the things I would say actually as a creative is that I think that and I do a lot of yoga and meditation, is that there's something about creating and making it up so that our imagination is really, really important for innovation. And the thing is, it's the not knowing and kind of feeding into the universal intelligence. I know it might sound a bit weird, that kind of helps us find that ingenuity. So I think the thing is that the not knowing, for me, the not knowing is my comfortable place, because I've always worked using a creative process. And I think the thing is that people need to move out of their comfort zone to actually innovate. They need to go out of their comfort zone and their knowingness to find new ways of doing things. And essentially, if you work with young people like I do, that they're already there in the forefront, wanting to find that kind of courage and adventure and, you know, that kind of discovery anyway. So I think that new territory of not knowing is where all the innovation is. So I think, and best practice, transferring skills and embedding practice is really important. And I think what we need to do is kind of share best practice with developing countries so that they can follow, you know, models and practices that we've used and translate them into their own cultures that, you know, that work. So, and I do appreciate that different cultures have very distinct, so it's kind of, it's not a one model fits all, but it's kind of utilizing best practice and the creative process to do something in an innovative way that works kind of culturally wherever it's going to be applied. So yeah, so for me it's quite exciting, and I do think that technology has kind of enabled us to have a global reach and a local reach at the same time, which is, I think that's probably the best thing of all.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Today we have our special episode because we are just finishing our 500 episodes. It was really tough, but I want to give thanks to all of our speakers because of you. But you people always support World Talent Economy Forum. That's why we can continue our forum and open dialogue. This month we have our special episode with India, especially with the Rotary Club for International Water Day. And beside that, one thing I believe those who are speakers, I saw that Mr. Jackson recently he had his birthday, 65th birthday. So all of you, the speakers, I believe you are like my father is. My father died in 2017. He was a freedom fighter. He was a lawyer, very educated man. I born in a very small country, Bangladesh, in a very small place. Rajbari is a very small district. But my father always motivate me about educations. I move around the world from many Ivy League university, many universities. Like when I go to London, I visited the London School of Economics. I do not go for other entertainments and others. So what is the things I actually learned from around the world? Education always the key. If any nations they can develop themselves with proper what actually Professor Jackson shared about Singapore. If we have proper educations, if we know how to do the innovative solutions, maybe we can solve all of the problems. So that is the key of World Talent Economy Forum. We want to focus on human. That's why we say talent economy. Everybody discuss about investment and technology. We more discuss about people. So we want to change human lives. Need more of your support. With your support, I'm sure we can uh, help millions of people. I just want to share from India, from Bangladesh, from Indonesia, from Africa, from Europe, many countries they are joining with World Talent Economy Forum, especially the grassroots level people where they do not have like proper education system. So your help can change human life. One things I know all of you are great entrepreneurs, Mr. Marshall, Professor David Smith, Professor Donalds, and Madam Ali. Uh, Last few weeks ago, I visit one of the largest mosque in Putrajaya. So that time I shared some of the views of Professor Jackson. So the peoples, the scholars, Islamic scholars, they say, hey, we always do not want to say anything about toilet. Look at the smart man. This man actually do work with toilet and solve the millions of people problem. So I request the developed nations, you have resources, you have finance, you have knowledge. Do not waste your money for wire or this kind of things. Many things we can do together. You can solve toilet problems, you can solve education problem, you can solve healthcare problem. So your support can help millions of problem. But where is not the solution? I request all of the developed nations, you should stop this kind of war, especially invest in arms business because this is dangerous for our civilizations. I need all of your support for global peace. Thank you, all of our speakers for your continuous support for us. Thank you, Professor Jackson, Professor Donald, Professor David Smith, Mr. Marshall, Madam Ali Rice, especially our audience. Thank you, bye-bye, and take care. And good night.
Thank you. Take
And
care.
Thank you.
good morning.
Bye bye.
Lovely to see you all.
Bye bye.
All the best to see you. Thank you.
Take care.